ગુજરાતી ભાષામાં જે મજા છે ને એ બીજી કોઈ ભાષામાં નથી. ગુજરાતીમાં જે ઇમોશન છે એમાં મજા અલગ જ છે. કારણ કે તમે બીજી બધી ભાષામાં જુઓ તો અફર્મેશન્સ બહુ લિમિટેડ હોય, જેમ કે હા, યસ, યો, યપ, યસ, એટલું જ બસ, વધારે કંઈ હોતું નથી. પણ ગુજરાતી ભાષામાં દેર ઇઝ લેયર્સ ઓફ અફર્મેશન. હા, એ હા, હોવે, હાઉ, મધર ઓફ ઇટ ઓલ.
My mother tongue is Kutchi, Kiswahili, and English.
Three of them I'm very fluent in. So English being one, second is Swahili, the country's language. The third is Gujarati, which is my mother tongue. And then I can somehow speak Urdu, Hindi, and a bit of Kutch.
I don't know, about 23 different home languages of my students, and looking at how either they've been able to maintain that language by taking lessons at school, or if not at school, then outside of school, and if not taking lessons, then how, you know, they converse with their parents and all of that. So the different sort of linguistic diversity and how that's influenced by, you know, the communities that they're part of and that they grow up in and stuff.
The only it's whereby I can't read, I can't write. It looks a very weird language when I see it, but then yeah, I can speak. I can speak because we have been talking in at home, and we have been told that you learn English, you learn Kiswahili in school, you speak in your friend circle, but at home you need to speak Gujarati, and that is how it's been 23 years of my life, and I have not forgotten Gujarati, and I'm very fluent in it. It's because of, maybe we can say that due to my upbringing and due to my parents being strict on mother tongue, they would say that if you want to talk to us, you just speak in Gujarati, we'll answer, because if you start speaking English and Kiswahili, we wouldn't, we would ignore your comments.
Since I was born in the family, Gujarati was the language spoken at home for everything, basically from asking about your toys, how was your day in school.
My ancestors migrated from Gujarat to Madagascar. So in Madagascar, so at the time it was colonized by the French. The French was obviously the lingua franca, that was the mandatory kind of language to learn. But unlike in Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam and stuff, Swahili, or the local language, the Malagasy, wasn't really taken on board by the immigrants, by the Indian immigrants in particular. And I think partly because of racism, really, and that, you know, superiority mentality that we had about not taking on an African language. But in any event, the Khojas in Madagascar really prioritized Gujarati education above everything. And so in madrasa, we were taught from a very young age reading and writing Gujarati.
મને બતાવો કે આ કયો અક્ષર છે? ક.
I always wanted to learn Gujarati, so initially my mom, she was the one who, I told her, can you teach me Gujarati? She said yes, and we started, with a small book, ka, kha, ga, and writing. It's very difficult to write in the beginning, but I was enjoying it.
Unlike, for example, in South Africa, where they lived with a long history of communal segregation, that they were able to bind or connect. If you are coming from this part of the community with this cultural background, you can also very easily switch to another communal background without hesitating. You find people speak Xhosa, Zulu, Afrikaan, English. They switch very quickly, so it doesn't really affect.
That sense of identity and those traditions that get passed down, the cultural references, there are so many terms in Gujarati that cannot be translated directly into English.
Yes, I believe it is very, very important and to keep the language of our ancestors alive. This is who we are. This is where we have come from.
Madagascar, the peculiarity there was that it was like the people who came from India to Madagascar were uniquely from Gujarat. There were really very few Kachis. And so I think that enabled that sort of silo mentality to flourish, because they could continue and it's still very much alive till today. Like if you listen to even the youth, like the next generation, my kids' ages from Madagascar, they speak beautiful Gujarati. And all because from that age, it was really drilled into them, and they still teach it in madrasa, and they still really prioritize it above all else. So I think there really is over there that real sense of inheritance, of the language, and that really strong sense of belonging because they don't feel a part of the African community and because they haven't taken on that African identity. In Tanzania and in Kenya, I think what's happened is that it's become a lot more of a flexible language practice. So, languages become fluid where you mix in Swahili words and the accent has, which is great because they negotiate these social contexts with, this beautiful mixture of Kachi, Gujarati, Swahili, Urdu as necessary. And so I think it really does reflect their identities and the fact that, it's a lot looser, I think, in mainland Africa than it is in Madagascar, where they're really that hermetically sealed silo.
As a reference to the bubble, by being able to maintain a language, particular that is only restricted to very specific members of the community, like nuclear family.
To learn on how to read, write. Also, literature books were available in Gujarati, and it used to be very norm. Everyone having even prayers books were coming in Gujarati and all. Right now, we see it in English and Swahili, but during those days, time used to come from India, and since my ancestors were from India, so they used to bring along those books, and that's how they came to know, and that's how their practice has been until to date. My parents, they have books in Gujarati, and they read in Gujarati, and they can also write in Gujarati.
And I also believe this language should also be introduced again in our curriculum, in our local curriculum, in the religious schools and the secular schools as well, if it is practical enough and there are a number of students. But it should be taught in a very interactive way and a creative way. The old type of Gujarati to be taught in that old way, it might be difficult with this generation, but not impossible.
Even just those 2 years from 5 to 7, when I learned, Gokaga and all of that, but still it gave me that strong foundation that, and so till today, like when I'm noting down recipes and I have to write like lasan adu and kotmir and whatever, I write it in Gujarati because it's impossible to write that, transliteration in English. It doesn't have the same sound and whatever. So, yeah.
Now just વિનંતી ચેક કરો ને કેજો તૈયાર તો ખાલી ચેક વિનંતી કરો ને.
Yeah, Gujarati is not only a language spoken to communicate. It is more than language, it's a culture.
મમ્મી વાંચે છે ઘરે, એમને બહુ સારી રીતના વાંચવા આવે છે, ગમે છે એમને, ને પાછી લઈ આવ્યો છું, બીજી લઈ જાઉં છું. ઓકે.
જાંબો બાના શું ચાલે છે બાના બાના બિયર પડી છે જીકોનીમાં ફ્રીજમાં ઓ 11 કરી છે તે હા ઓકે બાના મોગો શક્યાપુ જાની ઉપર મુઈકાપુ કે બાકુડીમાં.
So historically, if you look, India and Africa, or countries in Asia and Africa, were always multilingual within themselves. That monolingual ideology of one language, one nation has only ever existed in Europe and America, right? Because in India, you know, there are more than 50 languages spoken. Same in Africa. Like, there really isn't this sense of sticking to one language. And I think that's the richness of this culture that we've inherited. And so to let go of that and turn into this monolingual, narrow mindset would be a tragedy, in my opinion.
Not disadvantages. We have seen that, for example, over the years, the Asian community is undergoing, I would say, sort of segregation from the larger homogeneous population.
Because that keeps the community together. That keeps the families together. You know, when you travel abroad, when you travel to international countries in Kenya, India, Pakistan, US, still this language is spoken, whether it's Gujarati or Kutchi or Swahili, and it brings people together. It's very sweet.
Because I felt it was part of our, you know, our heritage and our culture. Yeah.
And I think that's where schools fail, is that we don't allow students to negotiate meaning and, you know, tap into knowledge in all their linguistic repertoires. Like we really demand that they stick to one language. And I think that's so wrong, because you're not making use of their entire repertoire.
Ask Google, ask Siri, ask somebody.
There's two. One is Maru Magajnaka, and another one is Maru Loinapi.
Interesting phrase in Gujarati. Okay, I know a few. One is that na kafan ma khiso che, na kabar ma kabat che. કેટલું વ્યાદી કરું છું